Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
And welcome to Political Trade Secrets. I'm your host, Dustin Olson. Thank you very much for joining us for this very important topic, the shifting politics of the Rust Belt. We're going to be speaking with former Congressman Jim Renacci of Ohio, who is a successful businessman. We're going to be getting into all of that, his background, what he brought to Congress, and his view of how the politics of the Rust Belt of Ohio have changed. You know, how did Trump take what was once a bellwether state and make it a solidly Republican state? So we're going to get into that with him. Looking forward to that. But before that, one of my favorite moments in the show is when I introduce the big man of the Midwest, the Buckeyes best, though Jim Renacci will give him a run for his money, I'm sure, and our co-host on this journey to political leadership, Sean Bartley. Sean, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Good morning to you. Good morning to everybody watching and listening. I'm really looking forward to a great conversation today. I think this is something that we've talked about on this show. Really, you know, in politics, people try to talk about demographics and other things, and those are all important. But really, the shift that's gone on in the Midwest and in the Rust Belt in the last 20 years is something that was widely ignored until 2016, and then people go, "Oh, something's happening here." But it had been happening before that, and then I think we finally had a catalyst to say, "Oh, hey, this was something to really tap into." So that's what I'm really looking forward to talking about, kind of what we've seen over the last couple of decades, and how Trump really aided that. And kind of what the future looks like in the Midwest and in the Rust Belt to really tap into where we've gotten to really help conservatives and Republicans moving forward. So,
and I'm looking forward to getting all of your thoughts out there on this topic, whether you might be living in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, wherever you're at across the country to join the conversation. So please do. We are live on 12 different platforms: Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, no longer Periscope. That was yesterday was the last day of Periscope for everybody. And wherever you're at, though, if you post a comment or a question, we'll bring you into the conversation. We really do appreciate your guidance as we talk about this. So please do join the conversation. One other way, we really do love having our text group. So please do text us at 202. I have to remember not to give it the wrong. That's right. Perfect.
3345.
There we go. 918-3345. Thank you very much for that, Sean. You have it memorized. I don't even have my number memorized. So 202-918-3345. Please do text us. You'll get a text back that allows you to opt in. And then from then on there, you will get text directly from me and Sean. You can ask us questions about running for office, about anything in the news. We're on that all day, and we love talking with people who are interested in really pulling back the curtain on news and politics, but in particular, wherever you're at. And we do ask that wherever you are to please do share this program. I think we already are over 80 shares for the program today. Thank you very much for that. And it's as simple as, if you share this program, you know what Congressman Renacci is able to share with us. Who knows what conservative out there that you might inspire to run for office, to step up to be a leader in their community, because that's what we're here to do, is to empower conservatives to be the most effective citizens possible, to be powerful political leaders, so that we can all together reignite American patriotism. And that's why we're here. And one way you can do that, it's as simple as sharing. You can So join ShareForce, make a difference, reignite patriotism. All it takes is to share the program wherever you're at. You can also like it, whatever way you can take action right now. We really do appreciate that. And who knows who you might inspire along the way. Additionally, if you'd like to become a political trade secrets insider and get the freshest political trade secrets, I just sent out earlier this morning a preview for this show and our weekly insider email. So you can go to politicaltradesecrets.com, sign up to be a Political Trade Secrets Insider, get exclusive stuff to be able to empower you on your way to being a political leader for your community and for our country. And now with that, Sean, how else can people take it to the next level if they want to be a political leader?
Absolutely. Look, either if you're in office or you're thinking about running for office, being in communication with your constituents or your target voters is one of the most important things you can do. And there is really no better way to do it right now than through political texting. And 10centtexting.com literally wrote the book on political texting. They actually have it for download for you right there on their website. So go to 10centtexting.com, get the 8 pro tips for political texting right there on their website. It's their free gift to you. And look, you can put an image, GIF, short video right there in the body of the text message and be in communication with your citizens, with your residents, with your voters. So don't miss this opportunity to really get connected with the folks that you need to be in communication with the most. Go to 10centtexting.com, get that started today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And if people want the Cliff Notes, actually, it's probably faster to read the book, but you can go back to our episode last week on Wednesday. It's on our website at politicaltradesecrets.com. We did a whole episode on the 8 pro tips. I was informed by it. I thought we had a lot of great questions from folks across the country, both Republicans and Democrats who are watching, who had great questions. So do recommend people check that out if you're interested in taking your texting to the next level. Now, Sean, this is going to be the first in our series on the shifting politics of the Rust Belt, and so let's set that up. And if you want to explain to people kind of what we're seeking to do here, so we're going to talk about that today. But then also we're going to talk about Jim Renacci's background and what he brought into Washington, what he learned, like how Washington works, how it doesn't work, what really is needed to fix Washington, and some of the work that he's done in Ohio. I know he's been doing a number of town halls around the state and what he's learning about the shifting politics of the state. But let's give people a sense for what this new series is about.
Absolutely. Look, well, first, some say, what is the Rust Belt? Well, it stretches from Western New York across the industrial Midwest to Wisconsin, Illinois, and Missouri. Okay. And what we've seen over the last 20 years is we've seen most of these areas shift their politics to the right. And so states like West Virginia and Missouri have gone from swing states to solidly red. Mm-hmm. You mentioned Ohio at the top, mainly because that's where not only I reside, but also Congressman Renacci as well. It went from the bellwether state to now being a lean to solidly Republican state. And Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin are now truly the swing states that determine national elections. Mm-hmm. And so in this series, we're going to discuss really how that happened and why this is important for the identity of the GOP going forward.
Yeah.
And what can be taken from that, particularly the shifts in union households in particular that we've seen over this time, which has been stark. I mean, considering union donations haven't changed at all. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's kind of mostly forced dues in most cases, I think.
Yes, exactly. So that's what we're going to be talking about, and I'm really excited about digging into that, not just today, but in the weeks and months ahead, because I do think there's a lot for folks wherever you are in the country to really take from what has been made possible here in the Midwest.
Yeah, and in a moment, I'd like to get if you'd like to share with us the background,
Yeah.
Jim Renaci's background. But before that, I'd like to let people know on next week we're going to be talking with the author of Ultra Learning, Scott Young, because this is a book that had a big impact on our consulting. But the subtitle: Accelerate Your Career, Master Hard Skills, and Outsmart the Competition. If you want to check it out beforehand, think of this as kind of a book club. You can ask him questions. I already have communicated with him about, every single campaign is in a way an ultra learning project.
Yes.
And that's what he talks about. He learned how to do computer programming, like a 4-year MIT degree in a matter of a year, self-taught, taught himself all sorts of different things. And you can take his principles, but we've used that because really you're doing a lot of ultra learning projects, learning how to speak, how to work a room, fundraising, all these different things that you want to take your abilities as a campaigner to the next level. And it's really fascinating. So he's going to be sharing his insights with us for that. And then later in the week, of course, we're going to be talking with Professor Maurizio Veroli, who is a big fan of Machiavelli. He's the one guy who's like, you know what, Machiavelli's not that bad of a guy. You can learn a lot from him. And we're going to talk to him about his book, How to Choose a Leader, Machiavelli's Advice to Citizens. So that's coming up next week. And do check out those books in advance. And we're also going to be talking about Jim Renaci's book because he's also an author.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So Jim Renacci, he's joining us today. He grew up in Western Pennsylvania before moving to Ohio about 30 years ago, and since then he's operated over 60 businesses, created 1,500 new jobs, and employed over 3,000 people in Ohio. He also served 6 years as mayor of Wadsworth while running his businesses. And then when the government bailed out GM, they closed down auto dealerships all over the country. We talked about it last few days. One of which was his, despite it being one of the best performers. so that's when Congressman Renacci decided to run for Congress, and he defeated a Democrat incumbent, helped the Republicans take back the House, and served 4 terms. And then during his service and since, Renacci has been traveling the state. He focused on putting Ohio first and wrote a book about his time in Congress. And so, which was entitled, I want to make sure I got it right, The GOP's Lost Decade, an inside view of why Washington doesn't work. And so we're going to be covering some of that and more as we welcome Congressman Jim Renacci.
All right. Well, with that, on with the show. Congressman Jim Renacci, welcome to the show. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Great. Well, it is. It's April 1st here in Ohio, so of course that means snow on the ground, and so we're so glad to have you joining us here. And you've had a wide range of experiences over your life. What experience most prepared you for serving in Washington?
Well, Sean, that's a great question. And what I tell people is real life experiences prepared me for going to Washington. I grew up in a blue collar union family. We didn't have very much. Everything I did, I had to work for, including my college education, worked 3 jobs to get through college. Started my first business with just a couple $100 in a bank, realized that the American dream was possible. By the way, the American dream was much more possible in Ohio than it was in Pennsylvania at that time, because Pennsylvania was part of that Rust Belt. The mills, the coal mines were all shutting down. Ohio was a booming and bustling place 30-some years ago. And I said this was the place really to go to. And I moved here, started my first business, and then spent the next 3 decades growing businesses all across the state. I had a construction company. I had nursing homes. I had, minor league baseball, minor league football, golf courses, car dealerships. So a gamut of businesses. And if you think about it, when you have those kind of businesses, you're also dealing with a tremendous amount of people. You get to know their lives, their history, and you get to know Ohio. And that's really what helped me. Now, you also said that I was mayor, and that's kind of an interesting story because I always believed in giving back. My parents told me, always give back, do what you can. They didn't have much, but they always gave me some great insight. And that's what I did. I was a baseball coach for 15 years in Wadsworth. I was a firefighter in Wadsworth. And then when it came to the city, which was having fiscal troubles, I was a businessman. That's where my offices were located. The business community came to me and said, we really like you to run for mayor and change things. And quite frankly, I wanted nothing to do with politics at that time. But I kept getting asked and asked, and I got convinced. And I learned, by the way, that was a part-time position, paid, I think, a couple $1,000s a year. It wasn't very much. It was service, community service. But what I learned was government's even challenged in a local level, because many times we have people in office who don't belong there. I mean, and that's one of the things I talk about in my book. We elect people because they sound good, they look good, that we like what they say, but in the end, they don't have the experience, they don't have the background, and they don't have the abilities to change things. And it's a scary thing. It's what I wrote in my book. It's a problem in Washington. And one of the things I want your listeners to know is whether I left Washington after 8 years. In fact, after 6, I wrote this in my book. Anybody who sticks around in Washington for more than 8 years is part of the problem. Because if you like going somewhere every day and not getting anything done, you're part of the problem. So I left there and I said, the only way we can fix our country is to fix our states. And I'm a big believer in states got to take back the control. States got to take back, we gave the federal government limited power 200 plus years ago. Now they're taking absolute power and trying to dictate what our states should be doing. States need to step up and say no more.
So a lot of our audience are folks who are thinking about jumping in, running for office at the local level, and that's where you started. What's the main thing you think they need to know before they decide to run for mayor, run for city council, in order to be prepared for that? Because it's not necessarily going to be easy. People have your phone number; they know how to get a hold of you.
Well, you're exactly right. And even on the local level, I mean, we had an $80 million budget here in Wadsworth. It was bleeding about $1.5 million a year. It had some serious problems. So I basically went in there as a business guy. I was kind of like the Trump business guy before Trump even ran. I went in and said, I'm a business guy. I'm going to run for office. I got to understand the problems, but I will also tell both of you, you don't really know all the problems until you're in the water. You don't know what's swimming around. You don't know what is going to attack. You don't know what the issues are. You think you do until you get in the water, and then you find out, hey, here's some serious problems. And that's what I learned. So for those that are interested in running, get to know your city, get to know your county, whatever position, get to know the issues, and then get to know the people. The biggest problem with politicians is they don't listen. They just tell you what they want you to hear. Start listening, and I think that really does help, especially on the local level.
Well, that is great advice. So one thing we talk about here, we talk on the show a lot, and we talk about in our consulting as well, as we talk about really getting the voters' concerns. And that's one thing I just heard in what you said is you really want to get like what is an issue, what is a concern for the voters or the residents, and really be attuned to that, because that's where you're going to actually be able to make some changes and see what matters.
Well, absolutely. And it's one of the reasons you talked about Trump in Ohio. Trump won Ohio. And by the way, I don't believe Ohio is a Republican state. I believe, in fact, if you look at the people that are registered, Ohio's about 23% Republican, 22% Democrat, and 56% independents. So what's happened is people have left the parties. And in Ohio, they left the parties because they were tired of what they were hearing in many cases. And that's one of the biggest problems in Ohio. It's not about whether you're a Republican or Democrat. It's how you can get the independents to come your way. That's the real key. And there's a lot of states going in that direction too. But, we are a Rust Belt Midwestern state where a lot of people are saying, I'm tired of those career politicians. Now, in the end, here's what also happens in Ohio. Republicans elect Republicans because they have an R after their name, sometimes not because they have Republican policies or principles. Democrats elect Democrats. And then what we end up doing is all the Republicans vote for the Republican, all the Democrats vote for the Democrat. And the real race in Ohio is always to get the independents to come your way in the general election.
So thinking about then, so Trump won it solidly in this last election. So is it the issues? What was it about his appeal? And I assume for you and your appeal when you're running for office that is really attracting those independents to specific candidates.
Well, it's interesting. If you do some polling, you'll find out that 78% of Americans don't like career politicians. Trump definitely, but Trump had name ID. So for the listeners, here's the biggest issue. You have to have name ID, number one, to win any race. Somebody has to know who you are. And the problem is too often people walk into a voting booth that last day or that last month, and whoever has the money to promote their name ID or whoever has the name ID wins elections. And incumbents have a little hidden source because they're an incumbent. So you take the governor of Ohio today. I mean, he's traveling the state as the governor talking about issues. Well, people get to know a guy who's been around for 45 years. Even our senator here, Senator Brown, been around for 45 years. There's an automatically inside name ID that gets lost. And then a new person steps into the game and nobody knows who they are. So for your listeners, I tell people the best place to get started for change is locally, because, in the city of Wadsworth, you only have 25,000 people, of which only about 40% vote. So you only have about 6 or 7 or 8,000 people that you got to get to. It's much different than trying to get to 4 or 5 million people on a statewide level. So smaller is better, getting your name out, getting those positions. But one thing I will tell you, people want to see new people in office. They're tired of these career politicians.
Yeah, I think that is true, and you kind of hit on something else there, that it's really being able to break through. So we talk about it like this: attention, intention, and retention. And so really being able to get the attention of folks in these races, and as you keep going up, and I think that's something that you probably saw in the race for Congress, that there was in your initial race, that you saw that, hey, you had to break through, and then you also had to take on a Democrat incumbent. And what lessons did you learn there that would be helpful for candidates going forward?
Well, look, I always tell people incumbents are very difficult to defeat. In fact, I think if you look at the percentages, and I don't want your listeners to say, well, I'm not going to run because I got to run against an incumbent. I do think incumbents need to be challenged. But I do think they're very difficult to beat because, number one, they're out there. They have the pulpit ability. And that's what I found out very quickly. I mean, I was running against a Democrat in a seat that leaned Republican, not by very much. So a lot of Republicans had actually switched over and were voting for the Democrat because they were tired. They were basically tired of the Republicans in the district and what they were doing. So they wanted to see a new fresh face. But what they found out is when they voted for the Democrat, he became so aligned with Nancy Pelosi and President Obama at that time that was what I call the lightning in the bottle that was able to change their opinion and get them to vote for me. Now, it was an interesting time too, and that's important. It was the age, 2009 was the age of the Tea Party. Mm-hmm. So the Tea Party patriots and the Tea Party people were out there. What's really interesting is we're seeing some of that come back. We're seeing all these patriot groups growing in Ohio. The problem is that there was a much greater steamroller at that time back in 2009. People were just fed up. They wanted to see somebody, but they just didn't want to see anybody. Mm-hmm. What appealed to them with me was an outsider, a business guy who had balanced books, signed the front of the paycheck, not the back of the paycheck, and they were interested in that.
Well, back when you were running in that election, Obamacare was a big deal. That was one of the big catalysts at the time for the Tea Party, and a number of issues that Obama had brought forward. Just yesterday, the current fellow in the White House put forward an infrastructure bill, as he called it, but it's really the largest tax hike in American history. And then you see the cancel culture and all these different issues. I mean, it's there's a lot of big things. Do you think there's a catalyst on the horizon, or is currently happening, that's going to cause something similar to what we saw in 2010?
Well, look, I do think the American people are divided. No doubt about it. We have a 50-50 country, and people don't care about facts anymore. They just care about what they hear. And one of the things I've tried to do is present facts, and then I get people trying to present alternative facts. And I always say, facts are good, but they can't be your facts. They have to be actual facts. And in the end, I do think this 50-50 split is going to be interesting. We got a couple other dynamics working right now, which are very interesting. I mean, look at the anti-Trumpers. Look at the 10 people who voted to impeach Trump. You would think they don't have a chance moving forward. They are raising significant dollars. I just read an article this morning that they have teamed up, the 10 that voted to impeach, and they are raising big dollars, bigger dollars than they've ever raised before. So that's a whole nother issue that's going on that we got to start thinking about. People think it's easy. Oh, those people, those 10 that voted to impeach Donald Trump, those 10 Republicans, they should be out of office. By the way, I agree. They should be out of office. The problem is they are going to get a lot of support from people who didn't like Donald Trump. And the election's 14 months away, and people forget. That's the other thing that's so interesting. And I think I heard you talking about this earlier. People forget about things. What happened? Nobody's talking about the impeachment vote a year ago. That was a big deal. Today, we're talking about infrastructure. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about something else. And quite frankly, 14 months from now, we're going to be talking about something else as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is that it is hard to keep someone's attention on something in particular, and that's actually something that President Trump really got. Was that he in particular, because the media was not going to be doing him any favors. He needed to be, directing attention all the time, and he really went out and did that, and put it on a lot of things that quite frankly no one was talking about. As you've been traveling the state, as you've been talking with folks, through a lot of different measures that you've been doing, what have you seen that has really bubbled up, that has really gone to some of these, the shifting politics that we're seeing in the Rust Belt and in Ohio in particular?
Well, remember, in Ohio, people are really concerned about jobs. They're jobs in the economy. And look, I'm in the field all the time. We just got out of the field. It's jobs. It's the economy, it's safety, it's those issues. Too often we're talking about masks and mandates. And by the way, those were big issues 6 months ago, because we had a governor in Ohio who was pushing the mask mandate, was pushing the lockdowns, was pushing the curfews, was pushing the shutdowns. The problem is 6 months later, the curfews are gone, the mask mandate's still there, but not as much. And people are starting to forget about it. Now they're worried about their jobs. And now they're worried about their economy. And now they're worried about, how did COVID affect the economy? How did COVID affect their jobs? And I've heard so many telling stories, but they're not talking about the mask mandate. So we have all these patriot groups in Ohio. Mask mandate, bad. Yes, it was bad, and it shouldn't have been done, and I didn't support it. But many people are past that. So it gets to what you just said and what I said, that there's a changing time. People now want to talk about jobs, the economy. That's what the president was able to do. Look, the president came in 2015 and 16 and talked about immigration, building a wall, and the economy. And those were the key issues that really got him elected in 2016.
Yeah, I absolutely. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, so I absolutely, I really saw that, and it was really amazing to see that. Not just when he started talking about those issues that politicians had shied away from for decades, to be quite honest. They were like, yeah, it's about time somebody talked about this. And the frame he really put it in, which was, this is about jobs and safety. And you mentioned, that's even still in the field. That is something that that voters are talking about. It is something that they're still concerned about. And so, what advice do you have for folks that are looking to run for office on how to really continue that conversation and, propose things that are really going to make a difference, either at the federal level or at the state level or even at the local level that can really move the ball forward on some of these what have been called populist issues?
Sure. Well, I've said this time and time again. I'm going to continue to say it. Washington is broken. I wrote a book about it. And I told people in the book why it's broken. People are there. They're spending money we don't have. Remember, in 2010, the biggest issue was the deficit, and it was only $9 trillion. Today, we're crossing over 30 trillion, and nobody's talking about it. Talk about an issue that's long been lost.
Yeah.
But I will tell you one thing, that the Comptroller General, most people don't even know who the Comptroller General is, but he was appointed by Barack Obama. I talk about this in my book. In 2012, he was sitting in my office. A Democrat appointed by Barack Obama said that within 20 years, the deficit's going to grow at such a pace that we're going to have a Greece-like situation in the United States. Now, people say, what's a Greece-like situation? Well, go look at Greece. Their economy has collapsed. They owe too much. They owe money to everybody. And they're pretty much, a country that has to live off of whatever other people tell them because they lost their ability to be able to self-sustain themselves. Now, this is a Democrat Comptroller General saying that to me in 2012, which is why I said I want to get out of Washington and get back to the states. And this is the most important thing for your listeners. States have to take back their power. Yeah. States have to start saying no more. We have too many governors who go in the position and just want to be good guys or good women. But at the same time, they're not changing our state. And Ohio is a great example. I commissioned the University of Akron and Ball State economists, and they did a report in November of last year, just a couple months ago, that said Ohio is losing ground. Ohio cannot compete anymore with other states. And that's because we have governors in many of these states who just want to keep doing the same old thing. The good thing is we have constituents who don't want to do the same old thing, and we got to keep getting that message out. So it's about getting the power back to the states, the cities, the counties, and the local communities. That's where it's got to. And then we can say no more to the state if you're a local community. Or I give you an example in Ohio. Ohio's cities, when I was mayor, had to serve, one of their line items of revenue was state funding. The state, actually 25 years ago, had so much revenue coming back in that instead of cutting taxes, what they said was, well, you know what we're going to do? We're not going to cut taxes. We're just going to divvy up the cash and send it back to the cities. I'm not sure that was a good idea back then. They probably should have just cut taxes back then. But then cities took that money. They relied on it to balance their budget. Well, now we have a state in Ohio and many other states. The state of Ohio, 23% of all of its revenue is garnished from the federal government. The federal government gives Ohio 23% of its money. So figure $1 out of $4 that Ohio spends is federal dollars. We got to break that change. We got to break that. All the states have to break that. We got to say no more. And we got to be able to, as a state, to say, we are only giving you limited power, federal government, leave us alone. It's one of the reasons why I believe in sanctuary states for Second Amendment, sanctuary states for all these issues. States have to take back their power.
Well, you think about this last $1 trillion boondoggle, the states needing those federal bennies is really what caused it. So many states need these bailouts from the federal government because they become reliant on that money. What are some of the other specifics as to what states can do as you see it?
Well, look, states have to quit spending money. I mean, if you just start, the best way to and by the way, this is good advice for anybody that's watching this program. If you're running for a city position, go look at the cities that are doing better. If you're running for a county position, go look at the counties in your state that are doing better. If you're running for a statewide position, look at the states that are doing better. So in the state of Ohio, it's pretty simple. I mean, we spend 76, I give you some examples. We spend $76 billion a year on our budget. And yet states like Georgia, who are about the same size, spend 44 billion. So how could a state like Georgia spend 44 and Ohio spend 76? Well, that's a good question. We're spending too much money. We have Medicaid expansion. We've got all these issues. But by the way, you could take that all the way down into your cities. Why does a city with 25,000 people spend as much as a city with 8,000 people or 12,000 people? Same as counties. We spend too much. And by the way, we tax too much. In Ohio, I think we're like the 8th highest taxing state in the country. We're a Republican, you mentioned earlier in your program, Ohio's a Republican state, and yet we spend like Democrat states. If you look at the top 10, they're all Democrat states, and Ohio's a Republican state. If you look at taxing, we're just like we're like a state, a Democrat state. So it's amazing because people really in Ohio want this change, but they got to get this information, and that's the key.
Well, I do the business side of the business, and I do all the payroll. And Sean always has the highest taxes, being there in the Buckeye State, and it is I find it ridiculous. Even when I was in Colorado, which is a fairly Democrat state, I had lower taxes. That's pretty remarkable to me.
It is. It is.
And I'm glad you're saying something about it, because you mentioned local government funds, which is how cities are funded. But then we also have layers of taxes on top of that, and and it's different everywhere, and it's quite the patchwork here in Ohio. And it's on the payroll side of things, it is quite a difficult thing to handle. And I know that you had quite a wider range of experiences with that, working all over the state and having companies everywhere. You probably saw that more than most.
Well, think about it. Ohio is one of the few states that has city income taxes, and that's a real problem, because I had a construction business. One time I had to file 68 tax returns just in the cities. That's a reason not to be in Ohio.
Yeah.
Ohio has something called a cat tax. It's a horrible tax. It's a tax on the top line of business, not the bottom line. So you could have a $10 million business that had $11 million expenses, lost $1 million in Ohio, and you'll still pay taxes on your $10 million. Why would a business stay here? We tax too much. We're almost like a Democrat state. And why do we tax so much? We tax so much because we spend too much. See, it always gets back to the same old thing. Just like in business, the only difference in business, if you have a car business, if you have a, whatever, if you have a grocery store, you can't just say, hey, I'm going to raise my prices. But in Ohio, they tax too much because they have to cover their expenditures. And there's another little interesting thing about the Rust Belt states, and I know we're talking about that. Think about Ohio. At one point in time, it was one of the fastest growing states in the country, and it was booming. So we have a tremendous amount of universities. We have a tremendous amount of school districts. We have a tremendous amount of what I call overhead. Cities were popping up all over the state. And then all of a sudden, Ohio's starting to fall in population. But we still have the same amount of school districts. We still have the same amount of cities. We still have the same amount of universities. So statistically, we have this big overhead in Ohio. Some other states are the same way. Some of these Rust Belt states are exactly the same way. So the only way to fix that is to raise taxes. And Ohio has covered up their raising of taxes by taxing everything. And that's the problem. You have sales tax on top of sales tax. You have income tax. You have cat tax. You've got levies. You've got all these taxes. But what you really have in Ohio, like many Rust Belt states, you have too much spending. And then I'm going to give you another little tip that's kind of interesting. If you're the mayor of a city, do you want your city to go away? If you're the superintendent of a school district, do you want your school district to go away? If you're the alumni of the University of Akron, do you want University of Akron to go away? The problem is the overhead is so extreme that we're either going to have to continue to raise taxes, or you're going to have to get somebody in that says, enough's enough. Let's merge some of our universities together. Let's merge some of our school districts together. And boy, when I say that, I lose votes right away because
Mhm.
people say, I don't want my school district to go away. I don't want my university to go away. But at some point in time, we're going to have to.
Yeah. So don't say it right now, so that people don't. So you're just talking theoretically.
Yeah.
So I just want to take a moment here. We have 109 shares. That's a new record. Thank you for tracking that in the audience. We appreciate that. And then we have a audience question. And then Sean, do you have something you want to update people on?
Yeah, well, go. Oh, yeah. So, look, if you are thinking about running for office, we're having this conversation today. We would love to talk to you about it at Olson Strategies. We work with our clients. We take their experiences and we put them to work for their constituents. And so that's what we're really focused on. So if you're thinking about running for office, reach out to us. It's Olson Strategies, OLSON strategies.com. You can email me, Sean, SEAN, at olsonstrategies.com, or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. And we would love to have that conversation with you today.
Awesome. And I have a question here from Alex. And she says, Congressman, what advice would you give to those of us preparing to run or considering running for office? Thank you. And you've already given quite a bit of great advice, but maybe there's a little bit extra. I know that Alex is in New Hampshire. That's kind of outside the Rust Belt, but I don't know. There's really not a specific description. There are parts of New Hampshire that would definitely fit into what I would consider the Rust Belt also.
Well, look, whether it's New Hampshire, Ohio, Pennsylvania, whatever, you've got to be able to convince 51% of the people to vote for you. I mean, that's your starting point. And people say, well, that's terrible. But statistically, you have to be able to do that. And then you got to be able to speak to those 51% with a message that is positive. And that's why I think it's best to start small, because if the greatest thing for me when I ran for Congress was that I was the mayor of one of the cities in the district, and I was able to turn a city around as a business person and as a part-timer. I ran it like a business. So I was able to use that when I ran for Congress and said, here are the problems. Now, I will also tell you that what people say to you after you've run for one election and one is, well, you're a career politician. If I hear that once, I hear it 100 times. Well, I mean, again, I'm a career business guy who believes in giving back in service. So you got to be able to have that basis in career. And then the other thing you got to be willing to do, and I would say this is in New Hampshire or any state, can't be afraid of losing. Mm-hmm. That's number one. And number two, you can't be afraid of saying, you know what, I'll run. When I ran for mayor, I said, I'm only going to run long enough to change the city, and then I'm going to step down. I don't want this job long term. And I think that's the real key too. People like that. They want to hear that. They want to know you're not looking for this to be a career for you.
Well, I would say in your specific case, a few offices you've run for, and then 60 businesses. The ratio there, I would definitely say, works out to you are a career business person for sure. And on that, 60 businesses. I mean, there's so many things that you would learn from that, from all the different industries. I mean, what a great education that we would want for so many of our elected officials to be involved in so many of those. What is it that you learned from having iterated and created over and over again all those businesses? One, for anybody who's a business owner out there, advice that you'd have, but then also how you took that. And one of the things we're fascinated by is how our government in general allows for people from all different walks of life to take that experience and bring it to government. What were you able to take from that that made a difference in your campaigns in particular from having created so many businesses?
Sure. Well, that's a good point. And like I said, I wrote this in my book. When I first got to Washington, I thought, wow, Thomas Jefferson, how did I get here? And then I looked around and I said, how did they get here? I mean, because the problem is a lot of people get elected with no background and experience. You know, they have a name ID. They're the son of somebody. They say they're something they're really not. They've done something that maybe skyrocketed them. I mean, the best example, even in the 16th district in Ohio, is, when I stepped down and said I'm not going to run again, Anthony Gonzalez gets elected because he was an Ohio State football player in many ways. But nobody really dug into his policies. And I'm not saying his policies were bad, but people elected him because of Ohio State background. People should have elected him because of his positions, his policies, and his background. And I think too often that becomes the issue. What I loved about being in Washington is my staff used to come to me and say, you know what, Congressman, there's a vote on the floor. Here's what it's all about. Here's what it means. Here's what people are going to vote. And I would say, yeah, but let me tell you what it really means in the real world. Let me tell you, I still remember the day. I'll never forget this. We're doing the tax cut and jobs bill. Now, I'm the only one of the few people that had not only a business background, but I'm a CPA as well. So I remember that the staff was trying to eliminate the FICA tax exemption in the restaurant business. Now, if some of your listeners are in the restaurant business, they would know that the FICA exemption is the exemption on tips. It's the amount, you pay somebody, for instance, and by the way, I had 3 restaurants and bars too. So you pay somebody $8 an hour, but they get tipped on, maybe they're making $20 an hour. Well, you don't have to pay FICA on their tips because of that exemption. If you eliminated that exemption, not only do you have to pay FICA on that exemption, but just think of the burden it would put on the businesses. And I told the staff, you don't realize what you're doing by eliminating the FICA tax exemption. Now, I'm sitting around in a room with 30-some Republicans, and I don't think too many others. There were some business people there, but I don't think too many people else knew what I was talking about. In the end, we didn't do that because a couple of the other members said, you know what? I don't know enough about the FICA tax exemption, but I trust what Renacci's saying, and maybe we shouldn't do it. In the end, we were able to stop that exemption from being removed. It's like the 401k. I'll tell you another example. And I can give you example after example after example. They were going to eliminate the 401k, but I explained what a great asset that is, and I showed them charts and everything else. So long story short, that's what I was able to bring to the table. Those are the experiences that I was able to bring. Plus, as a business owner in 60 businesses in Ohio, I could tell you the wrath of the federal and state government caused me nothing but problems. I mean, everything from overtaxing to overregulating, I lived it. And I always said, we got to change that. So when you live it, it's a little easier to be able to step into the game and make a difference.
Yeah, that is such a great point, and people can talk about it theoretically, but having lived it and seen it, I can only imagine some of the crazy things that you've seen over that time. You talk about in your bio, and I know, and I've known this from talking with you in the past, is that what propelled you to run for Congress was really the bailout of GM, and really how that all came about. Can you paint the picture for the audience about the government bailout of GM and how that motivated you to run for Congress?
Yes, some people have to see, this is an issue that a lot of people have forgotten about. But in 2009, I was a General Motors dealership. I took over. General Motors came to Jim Renacci and said, we have a failing dealership in Wadsworth, Ohio. We would love for you to take it over. And I did. And I turned it around. And I was actually working with General Motors because it was one of those downtown locations in a small city. So I had agreed and already got approval to move that dealership out on the highway, still in Wadsworth, but out on the highway. General Motors signed off on that. In fact, that was one of the conditions of the franchise, that I would move it out. So I'd taken an option on the land. General Motors was happy with me. The business was turning around. Life was going good. And then all of a sudden, General Motors gets taken over by the federal government and the Barack Obama administration. They set up 5 car czars. And by the way, if you look into the 5 car czars, none of them even drove cars. They were New York elitists who drove cabs around. But long story short, they made the decision of who stayed and who didn't stay. So you had government interfering with the private sector and making a decision. But General Motors, and we knew this was coming, but General Motors contacted me and said, Jim, you don't have anything to worry about. You're one of the best dealers in Ohio, and we're going to make sure you're still around, so don't worry about it. Well, lo and behold, they weren't the ones who made the decision. The federal government made the decision. And the federal government actually, the overreach of federal authority made a decision that not only my dealership, but many dealerships, 1,200 dealerships across the country were going to be shuttered because somebody in Washington made that decision. That was 58 employees at my location, a profitable location that was doing very well, and yet they made that decision. That's what made me say, enough's enough. That's when I called my congressman. I put this in a book, and I told him I needed his help. He was a Democrat. He came to my location. He met with my employees. He said he would help. He said he would vote to reinstate my business. And quite frankly, in June of 2009, there was a vote on the House floor to reinstate my dealership and many, many others across the state. He voted against it. And that was a turning point for me. I had already been told my dealership was going to be taken away, but now I had a congressperson, an elected official, lying to me. I called him up that day and I said, I'm going to get involved in this race because you're a liar and somebody who can't be trusted, and I'm going to remove you from that office. And I couldn't see anybody that could win. So in August of 2009, I jumped into the race. And then, of course, 13 or 14 months later, I defeated that congressman with that story. And also one other thing. He was one of those, we talked about this, he's one that voted against the Affordable Care Act at first, representing his district. But then when Barack Obama called him and said, I need your vote, he was one of those the second time around that voted for it too. So that, along with the General Motors dealership, really propelled me into winning that election.
Well, thank God.
Yeah, exactly. And it really was, we look back on stories and what has people run, and it is one of the most fascinating stories that we've seen that says, hey, this is really something that got to the heart of what people are trying to do out there. And you just wanted to live, you just wanted to live your life, make a difference for your employees and their families. And here the federal government said, no, we know better. And so, I want to acknowledge you for really taking that up. And then one thing I'd just love to hear how these experiences really made a difference for you, and just what you got most out of it was, you mentioned owning a minor league baseball team and the arena football team. What did you get from those experiences, both in the owning the sports team, but then also, I'm guessing, having to work with other owners and stuff like that too?
Sure. Well, look, my business life was just great because I think I've told this story so much. I love to take over new businesses. And I used to say, remember, I grew up, and I paid for part of my college education by being a mechanic, working in a body shop. I loved cars. And I realized that a car, you could run it without any tires. You could run it with, half the spark plugs gone. You could run it a lot of ways. But if you took the carburetor and took it away from the engine, that car couldn't run. So I used that example in business. I used to say, I want to find the carburetor in the business. And I don't care what business it is. I don't care whether it's minor league baseball. I don't care whether it's a nursing home. I don't care what it is. If you find the carburetor, you can make that business work. And I used to just love going from different business to business, finding the carburetor, which I call it, and then making that business run properly. And I was successful at it, but it wasn't always me either. I mean, I always tell people, it's not about just finding the carburetor. It's about finding the people around you that believe in your positions and your policies and working together as a team to get things done. I love doing that as well. So whether it was minor league baseball, the Arena Football League. The Arena Football League was a great experience because I sat around the table with owners of NFL teams and really saw egos at best. And that experience I took to Washington, because you want to talk about egos, 535 egos in Washington. And you got to be able to work with every one of them.
So talking about the sports experience in the arena football, you worked closely with President Trump when you were in Congress, and he had I don't think it's a secret. He talked about it in his book. I don't think he really likes the NFL too much. And he had his own sports team a while back. 20, 30 years ago, he was out to take out the NFL, it seemed like. But is that experience of arena football and being in sports, was that something you had in common with President Trump?
Well, it's interesting. I think I have a lot in common with President Trump. It's one of the reasons why I was one of the few people that endorsed him in 2016 in Ohio before the Ohio primary. It's funny. If you go to Ohio, you'll see all these people now, I'm a pro-Trumper, I'm a Trumper, I'm a Trumper. But if you really look back, when the decision was made, which was in March of 2016, I endorsed President Trump in Cleveland, Ohio, behind the stage, and there was only 3 of us in the room because nobody was getting behind President Trump at that time, because we had a person called Governor Kasich who was running for president, and everybody in Ohio was sticking with Governor Kasich. Now, you hear all these people that are running for Senate right now in Ohio, and it's kind of comical. I'm a Trumper, I'm a Trumper, I'm a Trumper. If you really look, they were never Trumpers. They became Trumpers after President Trump won, which is a lot easier to do that after the person wins. And I think, so if you look at me, I ran for office as a business person who wanted to make a difference. And that's really what President Trump wanted to do. A business person wanted to make a difference. Now, clearly, I guess you can call him a career politician now. That's what people want to say about me, because he ran for office, he got elected, so he's a career politician. Now, he's a career businessman that went to office to try and make a difference.
I have a sense that he probably tries to figure out in his own way where the carburetor is and whatever he's involved. And thinking about that, when you think about government and you think about maybe even his insights, where is the carburetor when it comes to government, in order to have it work for the people, not to have it work for government, but to have it work for the people?
Well, the best way for Washington and even statewide elections in Ohio and many other states to work for the people is you got to term limit people out. It's an interesting factor. 78% or 79% of the people in this country believe in term limits, Republicans and Democrats. The problem that we have in Washington and even Ohio statewide, if you look at the people that have been elected statewide in Ohio, they're the same people. Now, we have term limits in Ohio. The problem is they're not really true term limits, because you can just jump from position to position to position to position and keep staying in the game. I really do believe you should be term limited. And then I'll tell you the other thing that would fix Washington, not only term limits, but balanced budget. If you were required to balance a budget in Washington, that would make a difference. So the carburetor is really getting people to understand. You know how you fix things? First off, you come back to the state, you strengthen your state, you say no more to Washington. You guys just take care of what you were supposed to take care of, which was, our national defense, our post office, our interstate transportation, all of those things. That's your game. Our game is to run our state and have 50 different states with 50 different opportunities, and then let the states compete. Right now, we got a blanket over top all the states from the federal government. So I'm hoping your listeners really think about, it's more about local elections, it's more about the state, and it's more about the state saying no more.
Yeah, that's a really great point. It's kind of hard to tell the federal government to shove off when you're getting $1 out of every $4 from them, isn't it? So,
well, I mean, think about education. People are complaining about the Ohio education system, but many years ago, Senator at that time, John Husted, brought Common Core to Ohio. And when he brought Common Core to Ohio, now we have to live with all the standards. And think about this. Now we got President Biden want to put all these standards into our state education system. How do you say no when you're taking money?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I think I really appreciate what you've been sharing today, because you can really see that throughout really all that we've talked about, where really taking this money, particularly from the federal government, and all the strings that have been attached. GM takes the money from the federal government. They get told, okay, here's what you're shutting down, and here's what you get to keep open, from guys that don't even drive cars. You want to take this money, states? Well, here you go. And by the way, don't worry. You see all these strings? Yeah, nothing to see here, except now it's how Ohio's budget gets to be, nearly twice as big as Georgia's budget. So that's the price of taking these things. So, but I really appreciate you sharing that. So, Congressman, do you have any last thoughts as we're starting to wrap up here on really what you'd like to share about Ohio, and really what is it that the future can look like if we take what we've learned about the shifting politics of the Rust Belt and apply them the next round here?
Well, absolutely. And again, one place you can go to is jimrenacci.com, JIMRENACCI.com. You'll see what we've been talking about Ohio, applies to a lot of the other states. You also saw my book. I do believe people, if they read the book, they'll find out. And I think it's only $5 or $6 on Amazon. They'll really get an idea of why Washington doesn't work, which a lot of people don't understand. And there's some very interesting things in there as well. But long story short, we need to be able to change things. Incumbency is a real issue. 98% of incumbents get reelected, which is why you need term limits. But people can term people out. There's the argument, by the way, I used to believe this. Well, you don't need term limits because elections will term people out. It's just not true. It's just not true. You can't overcome the name ID, and you can't overcome the money that flows. So what I'm hoping, especially in the Rust Belt states, by the way, I want to go back to one thing in the Rust Belt states. President Trump won by getting Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, 4 of those Rust Belt states to come his way. Isn't it amazing in 2018 that the Senate campaign and McConnell, Leader McConnell, did not support any senator running in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio? So think about that Rust Belt. That Rust Belt can be a very important set of states to make a difference. And you would and some people say, well, he didn't support many of those candidates because they were Trump candidates. That could be. I don't know. But in the end, these states can become very important. But we have to have the people step up and say, no more. We don't want career politicians. We want a state that can compete with other states. And by the way, please have your listeners go to the jimrenacci.com and pull the University of Akron Ball State report, because it really shows you why the Rust Belt states are losing ground as well.
Yeah.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for sharing. Thank you for being on. It really is a great report. It's also a great book. So do encourage people to check that out. It's The GOP's Lost Decade, and really gets into what works and what doesn't work in Washington. And so really a good read there for folks that want to get how it works on the inside. And I think that's a perspective that we don't get to see too much and get to hear about. So really appreciate you sharing that and writing that, and encourage our listeners and viewers to take a look at that. So
yeah, absolutely. And Congressman, thank you so much for so many great insights. I know that you have inspired so many people who are out there, who are business leaders, who are also looking to be in politics. We really do appreciate it. We've gotten great feedback already on the interview. So it really is inspiring for people that they can make a difference in their community, just like you have, and for their state. So thank you for your service, first of all. Thank you for all the jobs you've created, and thank you for the resources that you've provided today.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for what you're doing too. We have to continue to keep people informed.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, and on with the show. Well, that was just a lot of fun, and a lot of great insights for everybody in the audience, including us. Some great stuff that I think we'll be sharing with a number of our clients, ideas that the congressman had, and really, really, really helpful.
Yeah, well, as we mentioned on yesterday's show, Congressman Renacci was congressman for my district for one term before the lines got redrawn, and I learned a lot about him today. Really his background, and just really some great fascinating stories about what about his background and really how it got applied, not just to being in Congress, but really all the other things that he's taken on. And so it was really a great conversation, and a lot for candidates in particular to take out of this, and really using their own experiences and applying it to politics and whatnot. It seemed like ultra learning on display.
Yeah,
so
totally.
We're going to be talking about that next week. So
yeah, each of those businesses, I'm sure, was an ultra learning experience. One of the things that I'm going to take away from it, we talk about trim tabs as a strategic idea, finding out where that point of leverage is. And I think I'm going to steal the carburetor metaphor because that's the thing that makes it run. And I think I'm going to use that from now on. So and thank you to Congressman Renacci for that metaphor. And it really does get to the heart of it. What is it that drives this whole thing? Whatever you're doing in the campaign and everything else. And I can tell, and I would guess one of the skill sets you learn building 60 businesses is the ability to get to what matters and to be able to simplify things, to get all the extra, crud out of the way and get to really the heart of things is a skill set you develop. And that's what we need in Washington, because there's a lot of extra crud and things that people get their hair on fire in Washington, D.C. that does not matter. It does not matter to real people.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just bring up the book again so that people can check it out and make sure that they can go check that out. The GOP's Lost Decade. That is a very almost a visceral response I get to the idea of the lost decade and lost opportunities, lost possibilities by of course, decisions by Republicans.
Yeah. Well, and we saw it, of course, in 2017 and 2018 in particular, but really just being able to even really the wave. I mean, 2010 on, there was really a momentum behind it that kept getting missed, and Donald Trump tapped into that and really took that on, and you really saw that, and the fact that he had to do a lot by executive order and other things really shows what was going on. And so I think his book really hits on that, and from the view of Congress.
Yeah. And I want to remind people that what he said there at the end, to encourage them to go to jimrenacci.com. That's JIMRENACCI.com for everybody on the podcast. Go to jimrenacci.com and download that report that he mentioned, the economic report that he commissioned and is provided, so that people can actually check out those resources. Highly recommend it, and I think he's someone to keep an eye on as to what he might be up to in the world. Definitely recommend going to his website and signing up so that you know what he's up to next. But this is great, and you mentioned ultra leaning. So next week. This is why it's so great to talk to real political leaders, people out there who are making a difference and are committed to big things, and getting other people to join them in making those real things happen. But ultra learning, Sean just mentioned a minute ago, we're going to be talking with Scott Young about ultra learning projects and his methodology for being able to learn a new skill, learn a new expertise quickly, and how to go about doing that, whether it's on issues, whether it's on even showing up at the state legislature as a new legislator. And these are all if you want to be effective quickly, he's going to be able to share with us. And he's learned all sorts of different things. I think 10 different languages using his process, computer programming, public speaking, I think stand-up comedy. I mean, all these different things that you can do. And one of the things is a big key takeaway that we've learned is feedback loops.
Absolutely.
So that so you can course correct really fast. So that's going to be fun. And then, of course, we will be also talking with, I mentioned Maurizio Veroli of the expert on Machiavelli. He's a professor at Princeton, but he's going to be talking about what you can learn from Machiavelli on how to choose a leader and leadership lessons. And then the following week, we're going to be talking with Michael Rechtenwald about Google Archipelago, his book on the the digital gulag being built by all the big tech companies, where they can pretty much take you out of existence, at least in the digital public square. So getting his thoughts on that is really good. I finished the book last week. It's pretty enlightening. And some of the stuff that I think we are, cybersecurity is something that is a big deal for campaigns. I learned a little bit about that. The blockchain, how that's going to affect politics, something we haven't even really scratched the surface of. There's a number of different things, AI and algorithms, how that's affecting people. They're making decisions for us that are impacting our politics and impacting the news, and really it's quite fascinating. So we'll be asking about all of that and how that's affecting real Americans in our lives. So, Sean, any thoughts that you'd like to add to the conversation?
Yeah, well, so you mentioned a moment ago feedback loops and really being able to get connected there. I want to remind people of one of our great sponsors, Grassfire, because they do all of the one-on-one human-to-human interaction that your campaign can have. So canvassing, petitioning, live calling, they really do set up real-time feedback loops. They let you know what's going on out there in the field. So on the doorstep, in front of the grocery store, or over the phone, get that real-time information that you need to be successful and be able to communicate with the voters that you need to talk to most. So reach out. It's www.grassfire.us. Schedule your complimentary consultation on that today, and just see how you can take your campaign to the next level and actually have the conversations that are going to make a difference.
Yep.
So, yeah, so I think that's so do check them out, and then really looking at what we talked about today. I think there is just so much to be learned, not just from the shifting politics of the Rust Belt, but from what Jim Renacci had to share with us. Really a wide swath of experiences, and I think that is really being able to bring that wherever you are. And whatever you've been able to do, you really want to tap into, okay, well, what is it that I can bring to service that would be unique and could make a difference? And because you are going to be able to find something that is missing perhaps in your city or in your township or county, or it could be in your state, either as a state representative or higher office there, or nationally, and really be able to see what it is that you can bring. And because we've worked with folks that tend to focus on maybe what their main career was,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't, when we talked to Andy Zay, look, he had a whole, with his coaching,
Mm-hmm.
and there was so much knowledge that he was able, and so many things he was able to discover there that he could bring to being in the state legislature.
This is the great thing about our form of government when it's working, is that we have people from all different walks of life who have done all sorts of different things. Our founding fathers were like this. They had lots of different experiences. Ben Franklin, my goodness, inventor and printer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Bringing all these experiences that are there to serve the public. And that's one of the things I got from Jim Renacci. And it's clear that people liked it. We are now at 111 shares. And I see a comment here that Share Force was fantastic today. I agree. Also, a couple of comments. Great show, guys. Thank you for the comment there. And great show. Another one. And a comment also. I love Scott Young's Ultra Learning book. Well, so do I, and we're gonna get to tell him that next week. So, thank you to everybody for all those great comments. If we didn't get to one of your comments, I apologize, but do go to our texting community, and that's a great way to make sure that we do hear from you and we can answer it offline. So, text me at 202-918-3345. Again, that's 202-918-3345. And I've been reminded on the podcast, because I can't say this, I have to say it again, 202-918-3345. Please do text us. You'll get a text back that has a link. You have to click on that to opt in. So we follow all the FCC rules. But click on that, and we will then be able to text you directly from then on. And so go ahead and text us there so that we can give you important updates for the show. Then additionally, I want to let you know about Political Trade Secrets Insider. You can go to politicaltradesecrets.com. You can sign up to be a Political Trade Secrets Insider, get exclusive stuff, get important updates. Like when we go onto Clubhouse, which we did, we're going to probably be doing at the beginning of next week. We'll do another Clubhouse event where we get to talk to a lot of interesting folks. We talked with, we empowered conservatives and we battled liberals on this last one.
Yes.
And so that's something that we're interested in doing. So for tomorrow's Good Friday. We may or may not be doing a show. And so just let people know that that's a possibility. So stay tuned. I do think we might be able to do a quick show. And I'd like to do a show specifically about, it's Good Friday and talk about all the good things going on in the country. And to get people's thoughts about all the good things that they see going on in the country. Because you see Joe Biden rolling out the largest tax hike in history, calling it an infrastructure bill, and all these things. It could definitely make you want to cry in your beer. So, we want to talk on Good Friday about all the good things going on in this country and in the world. So that might be something we'll be doing tomorrow or Monday to do that. So, Sean, any last final thoughts as we let people go off into their day?
Yeah, well, again, just want to thank everybody for coming on. Really enjoyed it. A lot of great comments. And so thanks, everybody, for listening. I want to thank Congressman Renacci for coming on, being our guest. Really enjoyed the episode today and getting to hear really his breadth of experience and how that makes a difference here in Ohio. So really appreciate that. And so thanks, everybody, and look forward to when we get back together again.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We are here weekdays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. And with that, this has been another episode of Political Trade Secrets.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.